Hi guys, welcome to lesson 3 for your 4th grade math lessons. We have been working with place value up to hundred thousands. Today we are going to be talking about rounding numbers. So you may remember from 3rd grade that the rule is if it's 5 or more, you round up. If it's less than 5, you round down. So, for example, if I have 200 on my number line, ranging between 100 and 200, exactly halfway in between would be 150. So that 5, if I'm rounding to the nearest 100, I'm going to look to the next place value over in the tens place to tell me if I'm rounding up or down. If the number in the tens place is 5 or more, we're going to round it up to the next 100, which in this case would be 200. If it's less than 5, then we would round it down to 100 in this case. So now we're going to start working with rounding numbers all up through thousands as well. So go ahead and in your packet, start on page 37. The problem says, last year, Tanaka's Toys spent $117,290 developing a new video game. So $117,290. Mia rounds the amount spent to the nearest 10,000. John rounds the amount spent to the nearest 1,000. What amounts do Mia and John each round to? So we're going to be coming up with two numbers. Mia rounds to the nearest 10,000. John rounds to the nearest 1,000. So first of all, if we want to round a number, we're going to think about what place we're going to round to, and then we're going to figure out if it's halfway or more, or if it's halfway or less. So for Mia's number, if she's rounding to the nearest 10,000, I'm going to find my 10,000 place, which is right here, and I'm going to look to the number next to it. So if I was counting by 10,000, my number line I would have just like counting by 10, I would have 110,000. And then the next one, if I counted by 10,000, 20,000. To make this problem easier, I'm going to, for the moment, ignore these zeros and just pretend that we're just looking at hundreds. So if I was going to count, if I was going to round to the nearest tens, if I was in, if I had 110, I would be counting 100, 110, 120, 130, 140. That would be counting by 10. So it's no different, except that now we're talking about 100,000 instead of just hundreds. But the same general rule applies. So now let's go ahead and think about what halfway between 110,000 would be and 120,000 would be. Well, again, I don't know why I threw those zeros back in, because I'm just going to erase them again to make the problem easier. So if I'm thinking about what halfway in between 10 and 20 would be, I know that if I'm counting by tens, half of 10 is going to be 5. So I'm going to count on 5 more from 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115. It's going to be exactly halfway between 110 and 120. Now I'm going to add my zeros back in to show that it's hundreds, thousands, not hundreds, but same principle applies. All right, so now we have our number, we have our range. We're going to either be rounding down to 110,000 or up to 120,000. And now we're going to see if our number for Tanaka Toys is more or less than our midway point, 115,000. So again, here is my 10,000 place value. I'm going to look to the number next to it and see if this number is more or less than 5. 7 is more than 5. So 117,000, I'm going to just pretend that these other numbers are 0 for right now because all I'm worried about is my 10,000s and my thousands place. So my thousands place is more than 5. So if I were on my number line, it would probably be, let's see, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119. So right about here would be my 117,000. So that's more than 115,000. So we would round it up for Mia. Mia is going to round her number up to 120,000. And we're talking about dollars here. So Mia's going to estimate that Tanaka Toys earned, or spent rather, $120,000 developing a new video game. Now John is going, no H in his name. John wants to round to the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my number up here because now I really do need to think about what the numbers are next to the thousands place. 117, 290, there we go. So I also need to adjust my number line. Let's just go ahead and start fresh. So first thing I'm going to do is establish my range. So now instead of looking at the 10,000 place, I'm looking at the thousands place. So if I were just looking at thousands, if I were counting by the thousands place, I would have 7,000, and then the next 1,000 would be 8,000, right? So I would have now 117,000, and I would have 118,000 on the other side, because I'm just looking at the thousands place. So if I were just counting by thousands, I would have 117,000. The next 1,000 would be one more than the 7, 118,000. Okay, so now I need to figure out my midway point. So this one is a little bit trickier because I have thousands and thousands. So we need to think about what is halfway between 1,000 and another 1,000. Well, remember that each time we go up a place value, it's like a multiple of 10. So 10 ones would be 10, 10 hundred, or 10 tens would be 100, 10 hundreds would be 1,000. So if I have 10 hundreds in between 117,000 and 118,000, then I need to think about what is the halfway point between 1,000 and another 1,000. Well, if you said 500, that would be correct because we have halfway between 1,000 and the next 1,000 would be 100. So just like we're thinking about halfway between 10 is 5. Halfway between 100 would be 50. Halfway between 1,000 would be 500. So halfway between 117,000 and 118,000 would be 117,500. So I got that by thinking about 500 is halfway between thousands. I have 7,000 here. I have 8,000 here. So 117,000, if I keep counting on, I would get 117,500 before I got to 118,000. All right, so now I'm going to be looking at my thousands place. I'm going to be rounding to my thousands rather, so I'm going to be looking to my hundreds place to see if that number is more or less than 5. 2 is less than 5, so 2 is going to fall on this part of my number line. which means that I'm going to round down to 117,000. So John's estimate would be $117,000. Now, if you look on page 38, they have, for the first model it says you can use a number line to round 117,290 to the nearest thousand. So they've drawn a number line that is a little bit more nuanced than mine. They started actually, well, so because they're going to be looking at both numbers, they started at 110,000, 115,000 in the middle, and then 100. What am I doing here? No, that's right. Okay, and then 120,000 on the end. They found that 115,000 would be in the middle, and so then they're looking at 117,000 is between 110,000 and 120,000 is closer to the 120,000. So for me as estimate, we would be rounding to 120. But that doesn't really help us to find the what John would round to. So the second model, it says you can use place value to round 117,290. Oh, it does say to the nearest 10. So the first one says to the nearest 10,000. This is why we always read the directions. Teacher Jess, you can go ahead and shake your finger at me. So underneath where it says model it says you can use a number line to round 117,290 to the nearest 10,000. Now the second model, it says you can use a place value chart to round 117,290 to the nearest thousand. So they have a similar thing that we did up here, but instead of writing it on a number line, they've written it out in terms of 100,000. So they have a column for 100,000. They have a column for 10,000. They have a column for 1,000. They have a column for 100. And they have a column for 10 and a column for 1. So they filled it in where they're saying that our 117,000 is going to be on one side and 118,000 is going to be on the other side. And then they're thinking 117,290 is going to fall in the middle. Down below it says 117,290 has 7,000, so it is between 117,000 and 118,000. There we go. There are 10 hundreds in each thousand. Halfway between 0 hundreds and 10 hundreds is 500. 2 is less than 500. The number 117,290 has 2 hundreds in it, so we would round down. So we're going to go ahead and turn the page to page number 39. And we're going to work through some of these problems. So we've already solved our problem, but now we're going to go ahead and work through. So number 1 says, look at the first model it. Which 10,000 is 117,290 closer to? 110,000 or 120,000? Well, remember we said that 117,000. You can look at the model it on the previous page. If we're looking at the 10,000s place, we're going to look to the number in the thousands to see if we round up or down. The rule is 5 or more, and we round up. 7 is more than 5, so we're going to round it up to 120,000. So that's what you would write for number 1. Number 2 says, which 10,000 does 117,290 round to then? Same thing, 120,000. Number 3 says, to the nearest 10,000, what amount does Mia round to? Same thing again, $120,000. So you've written the same answer 3 times, just in case you weren't sure. Number 4 says, look at the second modelet, which 1,000 does 117,290 round to 117,000 or 118,000. You can compare the number of hundreds. So again, we're going to look, we're rounding to our thousands place. We're going to look to the next number over. 2 is less than 5. So we are going to round it down to 117,000 instead of rounding up to 118,000. So continuing on, it says you can compare the number of hundreds in 117,290 to 500s to help you know whether to round up or down. So again, you would round down to 117,000. Number 5, to the nearest 10,000, what amount does John round 117,290 to? 117,000. All right, so lots of practice writing those bigger numbers on those problems. On page 40, I'm going to have you guys go ahead and pause the video and work through the problems 8, 9, and 10. We're going to skip number 7 on page 39. So go ahead and skip on over to page 40 and do numbers 8, 9, and 10 on your own. Make sure to pause the video. And then when you're done, come on back and we'll check your work. Okay, now that you have finished problems 8, 9, and 10, we're going to go ahead and review. So the first problem says Mr. Ruiz's company collects 32,376 water bottles to recycle. Mr. Ruiz rounds this amount to the nearest 10,000. What number does Mr. Ruiz round the number of water bottles to? Show your work. So I think the easiest way is to think about, he's going to be rounding to the nearest 10,000. So I'm going to go ahead and put a line under my 10,000 to tell me that's what I'm going to round to. I like thinking about these on a number line. I find that useful. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my number line to show my work. If you did it a different way, that's fine too, but you will either need to explain with words, pictures, or a math equation how you got your answer. So if I'm looking at the 10,000, my first 10,000 would be 30,000, right? Because if I just ignore all of the other numbers, this is 3 in the 10,000th place. 3 tens is 30. So this would be 30,000. If I'm counting by tens, again, I'm going to make my problem easier by erasing my zeros. If I were counting by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40 would be the next 10. And now I'm just going to go back in and add in my extra zeros to make it 10. Now my halfway point again is going to be 5 or more in the next place value. So in the thousands place, I'm going to have a 5. Now I have 35,000 is halfway between 30,000 and 40,000. So now if I look to my number, in the thousands place, I have a 2. I need to have a 5 or more to round up to 40,000. 2 is less than 5. So my number is going to round down. It's going to round to 30,000 if you round to the nearest 10,000. So you can show it on a number line. I would even accept if you wanted to show me that you are rounding to the 10,000th place. Underline where you're going to be the number that you're going to be rounding. Draw an arrow to show that you're looking to the next number. Give me a little window into your brain by saying 2 is less than 5. So 32,376 round to 30,000. Okay, so that would be an example of if you didn't want to draw out a number line, that would be an example of how you could use a combination of math numbers and words to explain your answer. So this would be a way that you could show your work if you didn't want to draw in a number line. All right, number 9. Joe's bookmark sells 468,500 books this year. To the nearest 1,000, how many books does the store sell? Show your work. So again, you can show your work in different ways. If you want to write it on a number line, that can be a really useful technique. If you want to write it on the previous example, they also, or not the previous example on this page, but in the model they also showed that you can line it up on your place value chart. You can also show it as, if this is the way that I think is a little bit shorter, if you are rounding to the nearest 1,000 in this problem, we're going to underline the thousands place. So that's going to tell us which number we're going to be rounding to. But we're going to look to the number next to it to see if it's 5 or more. 5 is not greater than, it is not less than 5, it's equal to 5. And the rule says if it's 5 or more, we round up. So use some words to tell me so. 468,500 rounds to, so if we're rounding up, our next number is going to go up. 8 would go up by 1. We would go to 469,000. Okay. Number 10 says round. And they give us a number. 49,418. And then they have a bunch of lines. The first one says to the nearest 10. So I'm going to look at my 10 place. I'm going to look to the next place value over. If I round 18, 18 is more than 15. 8 is more than 5. So that would round up to the nearest 10. If I counted by 10, 10, 20. We also know that if we were to draw a number line with 10 and 20, halfway would be 15. 18 would be about here. So 18 is closer to 20 than it is to 10. So our number, we would rewrite it as 649,400. Our other numbers stay the same because we're only rounding our tens place. But then we're going to round 18 up to 20. So rounding to the nearest 10, we would have 649,420. Now they want us to round to the nearest 100. So I'm going to erase my line. Now I'm looking at the hundreds place. So I'm going to look to the number next to it. 1 is less than 5. So that tells me I'm going to round down. So now I just need to figure out what I'm rounding down to. Well, I'm going to leave my first 3 numbers the same because I want to focus on the hundreds. So if I round down, it means this number doesn't change. I'm already in the 400s, but 18 is not going, if it was halfway, we would have a 5 in the tens place, which would mean that we would need 450 or more to round up. 418 is less, so we're just going to go ahead and round it down to the next 100, which would be 400. All right. The next one, I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to have us round to the nearest 1,000. Yep. So now we have a 9 in the thousands place. I'm going to look to the 4 in the hundreds place. 4 is less than 5. My first numbers stay the same. 64. Oh, wait, nope. Yep. Just kidding. 64,000. Now my 9 is the one that's going to change. So 4 is less than 5. So I'm going to round down. So if I had 9,000 and 10,000 as my numbers that they would fall between, I would have 9,500 as my halfway point. I have 9,400, close but no cigar. We're going to round down to 9,000. Now, An important thing to note, if this number had been, I'm just going to change the problem real quick. If this had been a 5 instead of a 4, we would have rounded up. 9 would round up to 10, which would mean that instead of having 9,000, you would have 10,000. That would mean that you would change your number 650,000, because we're adding one more group of 10,000. But that's not what the problem was asking. All right, next up we're looking to round to the nearest 10,000. So now I'm going to look at my 10,000 place. Look to the number next door. 9 is more than 5, so I know I'm going to round up. My first number stays the same. My 4 is going to round up to a 5. And all my other numbers change to 0. 100,000 look next door. 4 is less than 5. I have 6,064. Oops. So the 6 is going to stay the same. All of the other numbers change to 0. So I have 600,000. 649,000 would round to 600,000. Now, rounding can be kind of tricky. There's a couple of rules that make it easier. One is, like I've shown you, if you are looking at the place value that you're rounding to, you're going to look to the number next to it to see if it's 5 or more to decide whether you round up or down. Now, if you round up, the number that you've underlined changes to the next number up, right? So 6 would change to 7 if we were rounding up. 4 would change to 5 if we were rounding up. If it rounds down, then that number stays the same. So you'll notice that when we were rounding 649,000 down, we rounded down to just 600,000. So our closest 100,000 to 649,000 would be 600,000. That 6 stays the same. So the number that you are rounding to, if you round down, it stays the same. If you're rounding up, then it will change to the next number. So that's kind of how I try to think of rounding. It can be a little bit tricky. All right, so we have gone over the problems that you did on your own on page 40. So that's your opportunity to double check. Pages 41 and 42 we will cover in our group meeting on Wednesday. Go ahead and keep turning to page 43 and 44, which are for some extra practice if you would like some extra practice. And that is the end of our lesson for, oh, I'm sorry, actually it goes all the way up to 46 for extra practice. Even if you choose to do extra practice, you do not need to do all of the extra practice questions. You can just do a few of them. That brings us to the end of our lesson 3. I will see you guys on Wednesday to go over the practice pieces. All right, thanks. Bye.